Hello everyone, welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. I hope you're all having an excellent weekend. I'm filming in the day for once, so I've got this bright window behind me, which is not ideal, but when I pull the blind down, it looks a bit dead. So we're going with that look today. I've also put the boom arm across. I don't know if this looks better or worse. It doesn't make a massive difference to how things sound, so if that looks not as good, then let me know in the comments below. But guys, I've been waiting for an opportunity. I say waiting, I started the channel back up less than a week ago, but I've been anticipating a moment where I get to talk about Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, because it was a fight that I watched, I really enjoyed, and I've just been waiting for the chance to actually speak about it. You can see I've got my headphones on today because I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I saw a great interview in the week with Carl Froch and Peter Fury, which some would consider to be a surprising collaboration, because everybody knows, if you've been following Carl Froch and his YouTube career, that he's been having a back and forth with John Fury, which has been quite amusing to watch. And he's also not in the best, not in the good books of Frank Warren, who is Tyson Fury's promoter, as he has been criticizing the Saudi shows, the atmosphere, and all sorts. To be honest with you, I think Carl has been taking every opportunity to have it out with everybody as it generates those clicks and those views. I don't think he's giving a disingenuous opinion or anything like that, but why not take the opportunity if it's there and you're a man who has achieved as much as he has in boxing? You can kind of say and do what you want. And at the very least, people have to take your opinion with some credibility. I've already had people saying to me, you want a world champion, you can't speak on boxing, which honestly I think is a ludicrous opinion, because that means if you haven't done something, you can't speak on anything. There's plenty of people who are objective observers, who can comment on things, you can assess, use logic and reason, and then come up with an opinion. Obviously, I won't have certain insights that somebody who's been in the ring can provide you with, but I believe that I can do a pretty good job of assessing things. There's many top level coaches, analysts, and pundits who have never been professional world champions and fighters. So of course, it's still possible to have an opinion and have a good opinion. It's just not going to have some of the details that being in the ring provides you with. And in fact, it gives you some advantages, because if you've been in the ring all your life, you don't necessarily take the time to actually sit and analyze things as much. You just kind of, you hear boxers saying all the time, I don't come up with the game plan, my team does. I don't pick my next fight, my team does. So that means you're not thinking about things as much. Your whole goal is to perform. It isn't to analyze and critique. So anyway, that's just a quick thought on that. But anyway, great interview with Carl Froch and Peter Fury. I really like Peter Fury. He's somebody, over the years, I've always watched his interviews. I always find him to be quite considered with his opinion. He's a total opposite of John Fury, in that John is very loud and braggadocious and he likes to be the center of attention. Peter is much more understated, much more considered, and he's just all about the fighters and good fights. He takes it very seriously, and he's someone that, carries a great deal of respect in the boxing industry. Of course, helped Tyson Fury to his first world title, where he took down Vladimir Klitschko in what was an incredible performance. And we never quite knew the reasons for their split, but it was around the time Tyson Fury had a number of issues that kept him out the ring for quite a long time. So I think a lot of people have for a long time thought that, Tyson should have stayed with Peter, but, we don't know the ins and outs of what happened. But for sure, some of his best form and some of his best years were under Peter. So we'll get into the interview now. I'm going to play it and react to it. There was some really interesting things said. I'm just going to skip to the parts that are relevant to boxing. They had a great conversation about his time in prison and other things, and some of Froch's career, but I really just want to focus on the parts where he's talking about fighters.
Can Tyson Fury avenge the loss to Alexander Usyk?
I think he can. We're looking at a big man, 6'8", 6'9", who wanted to have a tippy-tappy boxing match with somebody who's an elite mover and an elite boxer. So I think they got the strategies all wrong for that fight.
Yeah, what did you make of the corner work towards the last few rounds? Because he
Just before we go on with that, he's absolutely right in talking about what Usyk's elite at, and I think he goes on to talk about the strategy and how he thinks Tyson should have done it. But for sure, Fury was always going to struggle with the level of ability Usyk carries, and his movement and his speed and his output. That was why I always fancied Usyk for the win in that fight, was because Fury's put his body through the ringer over the last few years, and we hadn't really seen him in there with a volume puncher in a very, very long time. So to see him in there against somebody who sets his own pace, who throws a lot of punches, it was always going to test his cardio. And some of Fury's best attributes, it is the fact he can move so well for his size. But that doesn't mean as much when you're in with someone who is a better mover than you. So Just wanted to make that point. Let's proceed.
He had a good middle bit, didn't he? Then he tapered off a little bit, and then towards the last 2 or 3 rounds, the corner was like screaming at him from all angles. What do you make of that?
I'm an avid believer of one man should give the instructions, whether it be who is the trainer there. So is it if his dad's the trainer, let his dad do the talking. If the other guy's the trainer from America, let him do the talking. But when 3 or 4's talking, how are you going to listen to all that? I don't think he listened to any of it anyway. You can't do, right? You're not going to listen. If you're tired and you're coming in the later stages of a fight, and you've got a man in front of you, you're trailing that fight, and you've been hurt badly, and you've come back from that, you've got all that to deal with, and you've got 4 people trying to talk to you. I'm afraid that's not happening. So whether it was emotions in there, everybody was speaking. I'll tell you what it looked like to me. It looked like it was all mates and just trying to G him on or something. I don't know. But
That's some very interesting points made there by Peter. A lot has been made of the corner work from Tyson Fury's team. We've seen some of the best performances of Tyson's career with Sugar Hill. That Wilder 2 fight where he came out super aggressive, fighting in that Kronk style. It was super exciting. And Sugar Hill was really clear with his instructions. For sure, his dad John adds a certain degree of chaos to the camp. Everyone was surprised when Fury announced that he would have his dad John in the camp for the Usyk fight. And it was a curious decision. I was surprised to see it. I think that there was rumored actually the reason that I might be wrong in saying this, but I remember reading somewhere that one of the reasons that Peter and Tyson split was because John was being such a disruptive force. And I think it's something that people have sort of speculated for a while, that John really would like to be the head trainer, which doesn't really fit when you've got a guy like Sugar Hill who's this sort of very elite head coach training a very specific style. He knows what he wants Tyson to do in the ring. He knows how to get the best out of Tyson. And then I think I remember seeing in the last round, there was a replay of the instructions. And it was like, on the one hand, you had Sugar Hill saying, get after him, stop messing around, don't stand off him. And then you had John giving him the exact opposite instructions, which is understandable as a worried father. But that's definitely not what you need in your corner when you're trying to win the unified, undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. The first man to do it since Lennox Lewis. You need that extra level of discipline and that extra level of focus, and you need clear instructions. And just as Peter's just pointed out, when you're tired, when you get to that point, you need clarity in the ring. Nobody's going to know Tyson better than Peter. And if Peter looks at him and says, I don't think he was taking any of that in, then it's probably true that he wasn't taking any of that in. And so the other thing to consider is whether Tyson was actually able to go after Usyk and be authoritative and stamp his mark on the fight, be aggressive. I don't even know if his gas tank would have allowed it. There was definitely moments in the fight where, you could see Fury would have a little bit of success, but then he wouldn't follow it up. And you just sort of wonder, was he actually physically able to? Because, it does seem like he had a bit of a fat loss / muscle building camp in the build up to the Usyk fight. He looked awful against Ngannou, and then he had the injury, which obviously was a bit fortunate, or some people have speculated otherwise, but was a bit fortunate in that it gave him time to actually go and get in better shape. So, I don't know. Let's continue with the interview.
I mean, I want Rob McCracken in my corner, as you know, from my whole career, and nobody else spoke.
It's a good point. It's still on the corner work here, but I remember there was a time in the Pacquiao camp when Freddie Roach got rid of Alex Ariza, who was the guy who was Pacquiao's nutritionist. And I remember him saying that Ariza was trying to get too much influence in the camp. Now, whether that's true or not is besides the point, but, he made the swift decision to cut him from the camp. And it's something that you see in other sports, in football. Sir Alex Ferguson, the manager, anybody who defied him, who broke his culture, who disagreed with him, who challenged his authority, they get rid of them straight away. When he got rid of Roy Keane, for example, or David Beckham when he was becoming an absolute superstar. There was all these examples of his authority being challenged and him just saying no, that's not going to happen. And it does seem like it needs to be that way. And Peter's right. You've got to have a clear set of instructions, a clear game plan. You can't have people coming in with competing agendas. And like he says, the head coach knows the fighter better than anybody. Sugar Hill was definitely the person best equipped to advise Tyson in that corner. But even if he wasn't, even if, say, John Fury had valid points to make, because there was always different opinions coming at him at once, how could he possibly have taken any of it on board? And then he's probably going, I'm just going to do whatever I feel like. So, I don't know. Let's continue.
That's how it should be. Because how many times have you seen it, yeah? I've had people in boxing with me years ago with the fights, and I've looked round. They're supposed to be helping in the corner and they're shadow boxing. They're actually shadow boxing, screaming to the fighter, yeah, telling you what to do next from the ringside. And I've just looked over. I've not said anything, but I thought, you are not coming again.
It's worth saying, actually, it's quite ironic that, Froch had Rob McCracken as his coach. He was heavily criticised for his corner work in the AJ Usyk fight, in the first one, where that was his last fight as AJ's head coach. And, he was heavily criticised for his instructions in the corner. It seemed like he was being very encouraging, sort of giving him very straightforward instruction that was just kind of to G him up and kind of tell him he was doing well. People sort of speculate afterwards that, he didn't know what he was doing, or that maybe it was because AJ needs encouragement. But either way, heavily criticised for his corner work in that fight. And I would actually be really interested to hear Carl Froch's take on that, as somebody who had Rob McCracken his whole career, who had a really successful career, one of the great, he's a Hall of Famer now, Carl Froch, and he had a tremendous career, multi-time world champion. Be very interesting to hear his perspective on that, because I'm sure he'd have some interesting things to say.
And then you've got someone in the side doing his cuts but giving him a bit. But then you've got Big John Fury. He was losing the plot, shouting.
Carl nearly went then. So he does this hilarious John Fury impression, as I'm sure most of you know. He loves it. And he's obviously done it without thinking there, and he's kind of caught himself just as he started. But luckily for him, Peter's found it funny. I don't really know what their relationship is. They're never seen together anymore, Peter and John Fury. But, he obviously finds it quite amusing. Anyway, on we go.
I do think Tyson can win the rematch. I think he's big enough, he's good enough. I think he's past his best, but he's going to be, at his age, 35, 36 years old. But he's still got enough to beat the smaller man in Usyk.
The irony is that Usyk's actually older than Tyson Fury. But yeah, I think that we all knew before the fight that Tyson had the tools to beat Usyk. And it was actually a similar criticism with Joshua, that he didn't use his size enough in the fight to implement himself on Usyk, because Usyk's obviously always going to outbox those guys. And it's really interesting because, Fury and Joshua aren't particularly consistent inside fighters. They'll do it occasionally, but they're not. It's not a game really. They're more, Fury's like a world-class outside boxer, and obviously is good at using his weight on the inside. Joshua is a world-class mid-range boxer who can also move around on the outside, but inside it's not really part of his game. And it's really interesting because, whilst he got beaten well, Chisora was actually the only inside fighter off the top of my head that Usyk's fought against who's kind of got that similar sort of build, but he's much heavier and, I say similar build, I mean similar height to Usyk, much stockier, much more powerful in terms of his strength and his weight. And, he really bullied Usyk in some of those rounds. Usyk still won the fight well, and he outpointed and outscored Chisora, but it does make you wonder, a fighter who's a bit cuter and a bit more sophisticated than Chisora, what could they do, getting on inside with Usyk? So you see that that's the way to take him on effectively, but neither of Fury or Joshua has managed to do that in the 3 fights between the two of them.
But do you think he does beat him in the rematch in December? Think he actually does it?
Well, it depends. Look, Carl, it depends. Yes, he can, but can he? It depends. It depends on a lot of other outside factors, because how much is he going to dig down? How much is he going to listen and get the right advice? Who's going to be doing it? All these things play a factor. But the best of him, if you've got 2 elite fighters together, the big one should overcome the small one in a boxing match. If you've got people around you, I'm not criticising his team or anything by saying this. This is where, we're talking right now, if he's going to win the rematch.
Yeah, of course.
If there's people getting it wrong around him, and he believes that course of action, it's going to go wrong for him. It can go wrong again. So he's got to really take stock and have a look at it. Usyk's not a middleweight. He's not a little man. He's not useless. He's he's a gold medalist. He's an undisputed cruiserweight champion. The guy's an impeccable boxer. But he's an impeccable boxer. Is he an impeccable fighter? That's the side what we need to see. And when you're 7...
That's a great line. He's an impeccable boxer, but is he an impeccable fighter? And he's also just obviously given Usyk his props there as well. He's saying he's not a middleweight. He's a tremendous unified world champion at cruiserweight. He's obviously come to heavyweight and now done that. So we know how good Usyk is now. And, I do sort of wonder if Peter could have been the difference for Tyson if he'd been in that camp in the build-up to the fight. Because I'm sure Sugar Hill would have been taking Usyk extremely seriously. And I'm sure Tyson was as well behind closed doors. But Peter does add that degree of respect to the opponent, the seriousness, as you can hear the way he's speaking about him there. You know, he was fully aware of what a threat Usyk posed. But that line, you know, he's a great boxer, but is he a great fighter? That tells you exactly how Peter thinks Tyson should have approached the fight. And it was something that we actually talked about a lot in the build-up. I say we. I wasn't saying anything, but I spoke about with other people, not on YouTube, that, you know, the only time we'd seen Fury in a comparable situation to the Usyk fight where he was struggling was against Steve Cunningham, because Steve Cunningham had come up from cruiserweight and he gave Fury nightmares. He was hitting him, he knocked him down with a huge shot. He was outboxing him, he was too fast and too slick for him. And Fury in the end just started marching forward with a high guard, and he roughed him up and he pushed him about and he used his strength, and eventually he knocked him out. Now obviously there's no comparison in terms of the ability level between Steve Cunningham and Alexander Usyk, but that's the point. We saw Fury do it in that fight. He made it into a fight. The problem with Usyk is his footwork is just so good, his timing is so good, that you do wonder if that's actually possible. And because his punch accuracy is so good as well, you know you're going to get hit when you try and implement that kind of strategy. But if Fury does commit to that strategy of coming forward, you know, I think either it's going to go one of two ways, in my opinion. He's either going to have a lot more success and he's going to stop Usyk, or he's going to get hit a lot earlier by Usyk and ultimately get stopped himself. But I really think that rematch will end with a knockout one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, height and reach and weight is such a big advantage in boxing. I mean, that's why it's a weight-governed sport, but obviously up to the heavyweights, you can weigh what you want. But yeah, you're right. Tyson Fury's got all the physical attributes.
And that point on weight as well, that's why what Usyk did was so impressive, and why, for me, he's pound for pound number one in the world right now, because he went up to heavyweight and he's dominated against what was seen as the two, if not the first and third best heavyweights in the world, at least the top two best heavyweights in the world. He's absolutely dominated them, and he's done so with, you know, a great style, landing lots of punches. You know, to see him, you know, walking down these bigger men is actually incredible. And he's just an absolutely elite, magnificent boxer.
You know what happens in this boxing? You become a world champion, and people whisper in your ear, do it this way, do it that way. Everybody's got an opinion, haven't they? Yeah. Everybody's got an opinion, because a lot of them want to put the face on that TV.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They ain't done the hard work, though.
No.
You know, they just come in and aren't they? The fame hunters, aren't they?
A lot of them are, yeah, unfortunately. There's
this boxing attracts the biggest load of under the sun.
I feel like boxing...
I'm going to beep that, but basically Peter's saying that boxing attracts people that aren't great. And I can vouch for that. You know, even in my short time working in boxing in the UK, I came across some of the strangest people I've met in my life, and it really is a free-for-all. I actually just lived in Bali for the last year and a half, and it reminds me of that, where there's like a very low barrier to entry, where like anybody can walk in and become part of it. And once you're in there, you know, like Peter's just said, you can get in the mix with pretty much anyone. I mean, within 3 or 4 months of being in boxing, I was around guys like Carl Froch. Like, that shouldn't be the case, should it? It definitely wouldn't happen in football or any of your other favorite sports. It's very strange how accessible boxing is. And that is why there is so many, you know, historically so many crooks and so many sharks on the scene. You've got to be so careful about who you sign contracts with, who you align yourself with, who you let into your camp. It's a crazy, crazy sport. And this is why you end up seeing a lot of the top guys becoming a bit more reclusive with their time with the media. You know, they'll only work on very specific situations. And, you know, and that's kind of the way Joshua's done his career. And I can't blame him for it, to be honest with you, because there's just not very many trustworthy people out there. And unfortunately, boxing attracts a disproportionate number of them.
The only sport where you get it. You can't sneak your way into a football team, and you can't sneak your way into a tennis team. But with boxing, you can hang around the gyms, you can help out a little bit, then all of a sudden, you're in the fucking corner for a world title fight.
I'll tell you what it is.
I was never in the corner for a world title fight. I just made videos. But anyway.
Come in the gyms, yeah, they'll even wipe your ass.
Yeah.
I can also confirm I didn't wipe anybody's ass.
To get involved on that camera and start sweeping the gym up. Because really, that's their fame.
That kind of like, I hear him say that and I'm like, God, I love Peter Fury. Like, I hope he wouldn't think that about someone like me who's like commentating on, providing commentary on the sport. You know, for me, the reason I'm doing this is because I want to talk about it, because I love it. I want other people to talk about it with and share our opinions and thoughts and get excited about fights and talk about what's been going on and just learn more about the sport. I certainly don't think fame is a part of this. I mean, obviously, you know, you need to attract viewers for this YouTube thing to work. But for me, it's really like, can I create a community? Can I make a little bit of money doing it? Because it's fun and I like it. That's pretty much it for me. I don't want to be famous. I just want to enjoy talking about the boxing.
I think we all know boxing. When when it's in your blood and you've done boxing and you know it inside out, you can see Usyk, can't you? You can see,
of course.
You can see the ones that's built people from scratch. You can see the glory hunters that, where they switch and they go to this one, they go that one. Once you're already a world champion, all of a sudden, then any trainer or that's associated with the world champion, it's the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
They haven't done the hard work, though, have they?
It's a good point, though. I mean, and it must be painful when you've brought a boxer through as a youth prospect, developed their skill set, got them into those world title fights. The one thing I will say where I slightly disagree with Peter is I do think there's some coaches who maybe they're not, they're not suitable for developing a fighter through, but then maybe they're very good tacticians and they're very good at analyzing opponents and creating game plans. It's the difference between a coach and like a manager, I suppose. You see it in football a lot. Like you see guys that are very, very good at bringing through prospects, but then they're not good tactically on the highest level. And so I don't think it's quite as black and white as Peter's made it there. I do think there's some guys, and what's the harder job? I think probably it is more difficult, in terms of your time and in terms of the years of grind and effort to bring those guys through, and then to not reap the benefits of that, to not get some financial remuneration back on your investment of time on those guys, that must hurt. But the reality of life is some people have certain skill sets, and some trainers just are going to be better tactically and better at getting a fighter prepared for the actual night itself, as opposed to developing them to be a rounded fighter.
60-40 AJ, yeah, that's fair enough. What do you reckon if AJ jumped in now with Fury? Tyson, how do you think that one would go? Hopefully it's a fight we'll eventually see, but right now, I wonder who would win that one.
It just depends.
Carl asked that question in such a funny way. Oh, I wonder who'd win that one. Like he's just thought of it on the spot. I actually think he's done a really good job of sort of relaxing Peter into the interview. And if you watch the full thing, you'll see they have a good discussion about other things before they get into some of the more personal questions. I say personal, they're personal to Peter, but that could potentially trigger him personally because he's got a relationship, obviously, with Tyson being his nephew. But let's see what he says about Fury and Joshua.
Styles make fights, and you know what? Again, it's how you train for each individual fighter and how you turn up for it. So it's, I'm sure all these big fights are going to happen, and they need to happen. But I think first of all, he's got to get past Usyk, and then it'll be a good fight because one's a boxer, and AJ really he is done right. He's a box puncher, isn't he?
Yeah.
So be interesting fight for sure.
Yeah, it's a good fight.
If either one of them gets wrong,
no, exactly.
One of them can come unstuck, can't they?
I mean, he is correct. Of course, he is. But it's interesting that he hasn't sort of totally backed Tyson, and that maybe gives you a bit of insight into why they don't work together anymore. Because you see it quite a bit with Tyson Fury, where if somebody's not fully in his team, sort of almost fanboying for him, and really hyping him up and overestimating his abilities and his potentials, he doesn't want them around him. He doesn't speak to media that don't just purely sing his praises. Even TalkSport, who are extremely Tyson Fury biased, if they say something that's even remotely against him, he'll just not give them the interview. And he's a curious character, Tyson Fury. He wants everybody to say how great he is. He doesn't want any. He doesn't want. Well, not any, I don't know. He doesn't seem like he wants much objectivity. That's what I will say. But Peter is an incredibly objective and honest man. And he's given a very fair assessment there. He said, if either of them get it right on the night, either of them could win, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. And I believe that to be true. I think that's a true, right now, I think it's a real 50-50 fight. But I personally, if it forced me for a prediction, I think Joshua wins by knockout. Purely because he's looked after himself better than Fury has, and he'll land at some point. He will land at some point, and I don't think Fury's been in with a fighter who has the blend of Joshua's boxing fundamentals and explosiveness and punching power for a long time, probably not since Vladimir Klitschko. Because, Wilder had the explosiveness and the punching power, of course he did, but he got completely outboxed consistently throughout those three fights. And, he didn't have the ability to set things up the way that Joshua did. And Wilder was able to land a single punch, but I believe that, AJ has a much higher output. Well, we know AJ has a much higher output than Wilder. He's a much better nick than Wilder. And look, it's one I'd love to see. And of course, Fury could definitely outbox AJ. His jab is far superior. His footwork is a lot better. But I do believe that right now AJ will get the knockout. But that's just what I think. That opinion could easily change, especially if Fury can come back and beat Usyk in a rematch.
I mean, we all know it's a tough task, but he can do it. He's certainly big enough, got all the attributes physically and mentally as well. Even though he's suffered his first loss, we don't know how Tyson's going to come back from that. But I still think he can do the business if he gets it. I think he needs to be fitter, because when he was dominating, and he was dominating round 5, 6, and 7, I think it was, he was landing that uppercut on that hook, and he was messing around a little bit too much, which I didn't like to see. But he showed he could dominate him with that reach and that power and that distance and timing. But he couldn't keep it up. I don't think he was fit enough. But maybe he'll never be fit enough because he's at that age now. But if Tyson can come through Usyk and AJ beats Dubois, that's the big fight, isn't it? That's the big one we all want to see. And
yeah, I mean, those are good points. I think we spoke about it a bit earlier, but yeah, I don't know if after what Fury did to his body, if he can get that fit again. Also because, he's just gone into a camp where he wasn't in the best shape. I think he could be fitter for the rematch if he goes straight back into camp now and continues on, but can he get to the required level of fitness to outbox Usyk? I'm not sure. Certainly if he goes about the fight the same way, he needs more stamina, he needs more cardio, but if he goes for the knockout, maybe he was fit enough and he just needs to be a little tweak mentally in terms of what he tries to do on the front foot. And he also made the point there about how Fury did very well in the mid rounds, and he did really well in those mid rounds. But it was interesting. A lot of people were saying, firstly, he won the fight, which I did not agree with at all. I thought Usyk won easily. Secondly, they were saying he won the early rounds. I didn't agree with that. I thought Usyk clearly outlanded him in those early rounds. But also, a lot of people were sort of somehow scoring the showboating like he was winning rounds. I mean, showboating means nothing. It's boxing is hit and don't get hit. It doesn't matter if you're bobbing and weaving on the ropes, if you don't hit the man in front of you. So that stuff's just to kind of distract and to create this illusion that he's doing something special in the fight when, waste of time. And I guarantee you would not see him doing that under Peter. I know that he did some showboating against Klitschko, but that was very much within the game plan. It was that herky-jerky, lots of feints, lots of unpredictability from Fury against Klitschko. It all had there was a reason for all of it. And look, it does kind of create the sense he's winning the round in the rounds where not many punches are being thrown. But the point is that, Usyk was outlanding him in those rounds, and he needed to just get on with the job and try and outbox him, not waste time with showboating. And, I get that it's part of the game. I think it's probably quite smart, but I think my personal opinion is if Peter sees him taking more shots than he's giving, I think he's going to say to him, don't waste time with that stuff. It's not nip and tuck. Like, Usyk is landing more shots than you. Just my personal opinion.
Let's put it this way. Usyk's got an exceptional team at the back of him. They analyse every minute detail. They're clever. Yeah? And I think that was a lot of the difference in that fight. Because they analysed every detail. Now, Usyk, he come on in the first 3 rounds. He seemed to take Tyson, then come on after that. Got the middle rounds, won the middle rounds, so to speak. But then it's almost as if he's let Tyson do the punching, come out and do all this, expand his engine, and then step back on him again. So it's like, put it on you, step back off, and then come again. He plans these rounds, this guy.
Yeah, and that's Peter obviously pointing to the corners again, and that potentially being the difference in the outcome of the fight. And, it's a fair point. And it's really interesting how he sort of explained there, that like Usyk clearly had a plan for the rounds, for the way the fight played out, like basically insinuating that the plan was far more detailed. And it's interesting, and it just shows you as well how hit and miss your team can be. Your team can get the strategy wrong, this team can get the strategy right. Usyk's got Papachenko in the corner, Lomachenko's father, and he is obviously a tremendous coach. He's produced 2 of the best fighters we've ever seen in their respective weight divisions. And Loma, but we've seen Loma lose to Teofimo Lopez, and he didn't do much in the first half of that fight, and arguably he got that very, very wrong. So you can see even the best coaches can get the strategy wrong. I mean, arguably, there's 2 halves to it. There's the strategy and then there's the execution. Maybe the fighter just simply hasn't executed what you've told him to do. But this is the point. There's so many different factors that go into winning a boxing match. And we can only speculate. And that's why it's fun to talk about this stuff, because we can speculate about it all. We can try and decipher, what has happened here. What bits of this went wrong. And for Tyson Fury, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the corner really has played a massive part in him not winning this fight. But he was in very bad shape in the months before it in the Ngannou fight. There's also an element of how serious he takes things. So there's a variety of factors. But when you look at raw talent, raw ability, and just what each man has physically in terms of their attributes, there is no reason why Fury shouldn't be able to win the rematch. But as we've just said, there's all this other stuff. Yeah, so it's a great interview, and I'd highly recommend that people go and check it out. There is a great section in there as well about AJ and Dubois. If people want to see that, I might go over that as well. To be honest with you, we've already done a little analysis of that fight, and a lot of the stuff in there was things I was saying in my video that I made about that fight. But look, a great conversation. I find Peter Fury's analysis and insight fascinating. And, you know, he's talking about a lot of the stuff that a lot of people have speculated on, but to hear it from the horse's mouth, from someone who's so close to Tyson, kind of confirms, you know, some of the things we've been thinking and feeling about the fight. Super interested to see how the rematch goes. I really hope it happens. I mean, there's some rumors that that Tyson Fury might just sack off the rematch and go and get that AJ fight, you know, while he's still only got one loss to Usyk as opposed to two. But yeah, to be honest with you, I want to see the rematch. I want to see it again, and I want the best man to win. You know, I don't hold particular allegiance to either fighter. I'm blown away by what Usyk is able to do. You know, for me, win, lose or draw, the rematch, his legacy is cemented. I think he's absolutely incredible. Definitely one of the greatest fighters we've ever seen at cruiserweight and heavyweight. And that's it, guys. Go and check that video out between Carl Froch and Peter Fury. I'm going to put a link in the description for it, so you can all go and have a look. Hope they don't mind me borrowing their content so I can react to it. But I've enjoyed this. I quite like, you know, I'm actually somebody I much prefer having someone to go back and forth with and talk to. Look, maybe Carl Froch will come on this channel one day. I'd love to get his thoughts on some things. I think he's a fascinating mind, and he's hilarious as well. He's doing great, and I really, really rate him. And I hope he gets a bit more punditry work. I'm not sure the networks will really want him because he's maybe a bit too controversial, but I'd love to see him on TV a bit more. Gives good insight, and he's someone that's been there and done it, which is something you always want to hear from. You know, I can analyze and talk as much as I want, but at the end of the day, I'm never going to have that unique perspective, as I was saying earlier in the video, of a former world champion. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. Please like it. Comment away. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Usyk-Fury rematch, on Tyson Fury's career, on Usyk's career. Anything you want to talk about, I'd love to hear it. All right, on to the next one.